All right, welcome to the Belisario Sonic YouTube channel. And today I have another special guest today, one of New York City's most sought after pianists, renowned for his dynamic performances and creative compositions. He's also an educator, serving as an artistic consultant and transcriber for Herbie Hancock's Masterclass and other projects. Now teaches at the New School, and he is also teaches at all kinds of workshops and master classes worldwide. Welcome to the channel, pianist, educator, and composer Julian Shore.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I was really impressed listening to this album. It's definitely an interesting listen. There's a lot of cool compositions on here, and it's quite a bit different than maybe your traditional type of jazz. But before we get into the album, I'd love to hear how you got started in music and how you um, developed this passion for jazz music.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's funny the in the intro, I don't have all that much time these days to teach much. So it's nice to hear m me spoken about like an educator. I love teaching, and sometimes I forget about that side of it. And I think that's probably the answer to your question, which is having great teachers. That's how I got into it. I was really lucky. I mean, my dad played piano at home. He was in some really cool rock bands and stuff around Rhode Island, where I'm from. And he played like Bach and stuff at home. So I definitely heard piano in general. But he took me to a local teacher, a really great, supportive, kind teacher who encouraged me and got me started. I mean, certainly with piano and getting into jazz. And then it was really my mom taking me to a jazz camp, probably just to get me out of the house, where I started to, I experienced this music with other people, basically. I was like maybe 12, 13, and just seeing other kids and getting to play together and stuff. I grew up in a small town, there weren't a lot of people to play music with. So um, I think that experience really got me into wanting to pursue it more, practice and learn, listen to records, all that stuff.
And there was a lot of formal education. I mean, you took lessons and everything, and
Yeah, I mean, after that, I was really fortunate to live pretty close to one of the great jazz educators ever in Hal Crook. He lived just a couple miles down the street, actually. So I took some lessons with him towards the end of high school, and then he got me a scholarship to Berkeley, so I was able to go there for free and start to meet all these great people. I mean, certainly became a mentor, as did Danilo Perez and Dave Santoro and Frank Kahlberg and all these really great musicians who were at Berkeley at the time. So yeah, definitely, I would say formal training, though I probably could have been more serious when I was there. I definitely, it was college. I
yeah,
didn't,
see,
you know what I mean? But in college in Boston, which is a very fun place to go to school, and so many other schools. I got to meet so many great people in different fields and everything. And I took creative writing classes and um, studied at the museum school and did all sorts of stuff. So um, yeah, I mean, it was a great time. But that's definitely where I made the connections, which kind of pushed me into the rest of my career.
yeah. Did you start playing at the jazz clubs in Boston and things like that when you were in school, or?
A little bit. There wasn't much. There was Wally's, which is a legendary institution that's been, I mean, it might be the longest running or one of the longest continually running jazz clubs in the US. And so I had a lot of good friends, Godwin Louis and Jason Palmer, and these great artists that were playing there weekly. So I would either sit in, or sometimes I would do the gig, or that kind of got me. In a taste of performing, because frankly I just didn't have much experience. Like I said, I came from a small town. I really didn't do much gigging or anything. It wasn't really till I left Berkeley that I really started gigging for real. So
And is that where
Yeah.
you moved to New York at that point, or?
Yeah, I moved to New York pretty much right away. All my friends were kind of talking about it, and I moved and then was like, all right, where's everybody? And a lot of them ended up staying in Boston for like another year. So I felt like, oh man, and they would be asking me like, oh yeah, how is it? What's it like? And I wanted to be like, yeah, come on, Um, but that was probably a good thing because it forced me to meet new people and get into different scenes. And I was super, super lucky in that one of my teachers in high school actually was a great jazz guitarist named Francisco Pais, and he had me on several gigs. And through him, I met the singer Gretchen Parlato, and she ended up taking me on the road for a couple little tours and some festivals in Europe and stuff. And I was wildly unprepared. I was not ready to hang at all. But she was so sweet. Her whole band was so sweet and supportive and kind, and just I went from barely having any performing experience to just suddenly playing these major venues with
Wow.
my heroes. I mean, I like these were guys that I was listening to constantly. I was a huge fan of Gretchen's and of Kendrick and Alan Hampton and Mark Juliana. Those guys were real idols. So yeah, I definitely ate it. It was a great learning experience. And from there I was able to kind of meet a lot of really great musicians in New York and start working.
Well, did you participate in like jam sessions and things like that in New York at the different clubs and sit in and learn from a lot of people, or how did that go? I'm always interested
Totally.
in.
Yeah, I loved that. I did, some of the classics at like Smalls. So there was one at Cleopatra's Needle when I first moved. That was really great. Saw a lot of really amazing pianists play there and stuff. But my favorite ones were, I think, in Brooklyn mostly. There was one at a place called Puppets, which was short-lived, but was led by John McNeil, a real jazz legend and a beautiful player person. And he led a really great session and gave me a lot of encouragement and advice and stuff. He was a real elder. Um, so that was a little different than the kind of like normal getting up there, young energy kind of stuff. And yeah, there were a handful of other ones in Brooklyn. I mean, with the most absurd house bands, like I would see Ben Monder and Chris Cheek and Kevin Hayes and all these great players, and sometimes I'd be the only one there. And it really hit home just how crazy New York is.
Yeah, I would assume that talking to all these different jazz musicians in New York is such an important place still, and has been, of course, for really since probably what the 30s, the 40s. But it's still the place to go to meet people and, of course, learn from other people. And you've got still a lot of legends there that you can either watch play or you get advice from or mentorship from, right?
Big time. And part of that also was that camp that I had mentioned, the Litchfield Jazz Camp, which is a wonderful place. I ended up teaching there after I graduated, a few years after I graduated, and um, definitely had some mentorship from a lot of people in that program. Charlie Persip, Junior Mance, Don Braden, even Sheila Jordan, who just
Oh
passed away
yeah, I know.
yesterday. I got to play with her, and we even play a little duo, and she was so open. And again, just I've been around so many kind, encouraging elders, and New York is certainly no different. All those folks live in New York, or Jersey. And yeah, I just was really lucky to be around people like that for sure.
What about influences? You have a unique phrasing on the with the way you play. So, what
Hmm.
were some of the key influences or record albums or key pianists that you focused in on to kind of develop your own sound? Because you definitely have a unique way of playing.
Oh man, thanks for saying that. Um, yeah, it's hard to think of yourself as having anything to say sometimes, I mean, speaking for myself. So I appreciate anything that I can get in that regard. I guess, certainly Danilo Perez, a massive influence on me at a young age, and Wayne's band around that time in the early 2000s was a massive sea change in the way I thought about music. Footprints Live, when that record came out, it really blew my mind. And then getting to study with Danilo shortly after that was really kind of like uh, you know, starstruck for sure. So he's a big influence on my playing, I would say, and I think he's a somehow still a super underrated musician.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with him. So yeah, I mean, definitely. What albums do you recommend picking up on of his to listen to?
Oh man, they're all great. I think there's an early record called Motherland, which has a lot of orchestration, a lot of different musicians. Really beautiful. He has a live trio record, live at the Jazz Showcase, that I love very much. Um, his recent records are great. He has a trio with John Patitucci and Brian Blade called Children of the Light. Basically the rhythm section from Wayne's band, and that's beautiful. Um, yeah, he's always putting out things. He did one Panama 500, which was so interesting and cool, bringing all this folkloric music and different influences. And yeah, I could go on and on, but I've always been surprised. I don't put much stock into those kind of like downbeat lists or whatever,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you know,
right.
I'm always shocked that I don't see his name around, despite him being one of the most important, influential pianists of his generation, really, and musicians. And like I remember reading an article in Downbeat when I was maybe in high school, maybe early college, with it was an interview with Brad Meldau. And people were asking him about his influences, and they were zeroing in on like Bill Evans or Keith Jarrett or these like kind of piano trio archetypes. And I remember him saying, "Man, right now my biggest influence is Danilo Perez." And so yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is with that. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. No, go ahead.
I'm always still learning. I mean, I've been listening to jazz for many years, but I've listened to a lot of the legends over the years, and then started getting into a lot of the modern players. So I still discover people, new people all the time, and I'm like, wow, how did I miss this person? How did I miss this guy or whatever? So that's kind of fun of the fun of this channel is to share all these new discoveries. So
Totally, man. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You would think someone who like started his career playing with Dizzy Gillespie and then moved on to playing in with Roy Haynes trio, and then moved right into playing in Wayne's band for like 2 decades. You would think someone like that would be
yeah, you would.
about as massive a star as it could be.
Hmm.
But maybe that's why there are some elements that you feel were unfamiliar or whatever, because I do think he's an under checked out artist. So maybe that's some of the hidden
Yeah, it is kind
influence.
of interesting how we focus on certain players or certain musicians, even if they're in these big bands. You listen to Wayne Shorter or whatever, but you're always focused on the ones that get most of the attention from the critics or whatever, what have you.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean that band is really a band. It's not like head solo head. There's not always like a featured soloist. It's like this really a group concept, which I think is why it hasn't been imitated that much, because it's just so unique to those musicians that it's really hard to try to do something like that because they're all such masters. But maybe that's been something that's uh, the spotlight isn't on any one individual person as much.
Mm,
So maybe that's
right.
harder to identify individual parts, rather than just the unit.
Yeah. So when it comes to your songwriting or compositions, like on this wonderful record here, which I think is fantastic,
Thanks,
really
man.
cool cover too. That I guess your mom did, right? Really,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, very cool. What was your approach to? How long did it take you to write these compositions, and kind of what was your approach? Because these are pretty interesting compositions. There's a lot of dynamics and development and things going on. So tell us a little bit about that. I'm always interested.
Um, well, It changes depending on the composition, but I really do try to finish a composition in one sitting or get the majority of it done. Because I always feel like when I come back to it, I've kind of lost the spirit or the headspace where I was in, the emotional state, whatever it is. So at least the core of it really needs to be done all at once for me. So I would say, most of these can be measured in hours, and then maybe I come back, edit, revisit, extend, things like that, a little bit overplaying it. Martin and Alan, my bandmates, they are incredibly uh, inventive and creative and giving with their ideas. So there's a lot of things that might come from playing together, and then that turns into the composition later on. There's a new section or a new vibe or whatever. So it's hard to put like an exact number on it, but yeah, in general, I mean, the music for this record, the stuff that I wrote anyway, was written over a period of maybe a year, something like that.
How did you prepare? How long did it take you to go in the studio and record these? Did you practice beforehand? You had Martin on bass and Alan on the drums. So did you guys practice these tunes before you went into the studio, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, we've been playing together as a trio for a couple of years. These were pretty new tunes. We definitely, we played them a few times, and it's weird, especially these days in jazz. It's almost like you make the record and then you tour the music versus the other way around. It's hard to get into that flow of always having a record on the table and working the music out beforehand. There's not too many musicians I know that are successful at keeping that circle moving. Usually, you have to really be supported by a label, a consistent label, and things like that. And now this is a new release on a new label who I love very much, and I'm hoping that I can get into that. But for this record anyway, we did a handful of gigs, but they were still very fresh in the studio. They weren't fully formed. The way we play them now is very different than that record for sure. Um, but it's funny, we played a gig the night before the recording session, and it was great. I mean, I really loved it. I was but usually what the I guess the trope is that that's the kiss of death. And I don't want to say that I love the record. I love what we were able to get during our recording and everything, but um, I thought the gig the night before was even more adventurous and open and what I want to capture. But it's so hard to get that live feeling in the studio, So I'll keep trying.
What's so? Tell us about the studio setting. Were you guys isolated? Were you playing all in one room? How did you guys set up there?
So we did end up using isolation, which I regret a little bit, but it was at Power Station New England, which is a really lovely studio, and basically an exact replica of Avatar Power Station in New York. Um, so we had a lot of options, and there's that huge, beautiful room, and every room sounds so good. I thought maybe it would be safer, but I think maybe next time we'll probably be all in one room. Um, now that I know that space more and I've worked there, and I think I just love recording in one room. It's such a different vibe. Um,
I
yeah,
would imagine it'd be more like a live performance if you because you're all next to each other and you can kind of if you're separated, right? You've got headphones on and it's a
exactly.
different
Yeah,
feel.
and it's a different feel. And I'm also awful with getting my headphones together. I don't know. I'm chasing my tail the whole session. So um, yeah, I think recording in one room is a little more real feeling. But you also can do a lot more with the sound, obviously, when you're in
Right.
isolation. And we had a really fantastic engineer who was also one of the main people involved with the label. So he had all sorts of ideas and did a great job making it sound really nice. And it gave him more options too, which I wanted to have for sure.
Yeah, it's a nice sounding record. I think it's really well recorded, and it has really nice depth to it and everything. It's well done for sure. What were the as far as how many did you do several takes and then pick the best one? Is that kind of how it worked? How long were you in there? Just 1 or 2 days, or
We did like a day and a half. We probably only needed one day. Most of my favorite takes are always first takes, second takes. There weren't many that were longer than that. When we did try to do others, I don't think any of those actually made it onto the record. So yeah, there's that magic, and there's that experience of like, okay, I've already done this. Um, I've already played this twice. It's like, how can I make this different? Rather than going with what your first instincts are, what just feels most natural. Um, it changes, you know.
and then how does it? So and then you mentioned that it changes now as you guys play it live and you start to maybe make changes or find things that you like better. Talk about that kind of organic development that you guys have on the stage, and then is that something that you would consider making a live recording of and putting out a live version of it or something like that?
Totally. Sorry, my cat just crept into the litter box there, so if you hear a little, sorry about that. Um, Yeah, I would love to do a live record. And in fact, nowadays, so many venues have these really beautiful recording setups. We just did a little West Coast run, and we played in LA and San Francisco and Seattle. And two out of the three venues had like professional recordings set up there just to have. Um, and then we did this wonderful venue a few years ago in Switzerland in Muri, where they have the most amazing sound I've ever experienced. I mean, they give you just a gorgeous recording, and we're going to be playing there again in October. And then we're doing an in-studio live recording in Vienna. So I'm hoping
Oh
that
wow.
it's going to, these days it's so much more available. So I'm hoping between over the last couple of years of us playing together, I'm going to be able to pick and choose some stuff and put together a nice live version of some of the music we've done on my previous record and this record. So yeah, that's definitely in the cards.
And what about, so you've been playing, you said, with Martin and Alan a couple of years now or a few years?
Hmm.
Is that important for you to keep together a core band? A lot of in jazz, you kind of have, everybody plays with everybody kind of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, for me personally, I love playing with them so much, and we've built something together as a unit that I can't imagine doing the same thing with anyone else. So for this, they're my guys, and I wouldn't want to play with anyone else. But of course, I have other projects in mind and other music, and I want to explore. But in terms of piano trio and what I want to do with piano trio, I really think they're the best people I could ever ask for to do that the way that I want to play. So I think that's really important. And actually, some of my favorite bands that I'm in right now are ones that have stuck together for a while. I've been playing with Caroline Davis, who's a really wonderful alto player composer, um, and she's kept kind of the core band together for several years now, and we're playing in 2 days at Smalls actually, and it's the same unit as we did her Portals record in 2019, something like that. Uh, and or Max Light, the guitarist who a wonderful, yeah, ridiculous virtuoso guitarist and composer, and he's kept his core quartet together for a few years now, and I mean, it's really blossomed from where it was to now. There's really something special that happens when you give a band time to grow together, you know.
How does that affect when you're writing the compositions? Do you have these guys in mind for their, if you write parts out or what they're That does that factor into how you're going to write the composition?
Big time. Yeah. I always write with musicians in mind, for sure. This stuff is delicate, and everyone is going to have a unique take on it, and sometimes that can be really exciting. And obviously, both Martin and Alan are super busy with so many projects, like we all are. So there are times where we can't play together, and it's fun to hear different approaches for sure. But I definitely write them with them in mind because there's not many people who I think can play it the way that I am envisioning, you know.
Yeah. What about the difference? I'd love to hear the thoughts of the different jazz musicians on whether you're a leader in a project or whether you are on somebody else's project as a sideman. How do you approach those two different things? Or is one more stressful than the other? That kind of thing.
At different stresses, yeah. I mean, I actually haven't done much like touring and stuff as a band leader. I've done, in-town gigs and stuff over the years, but this is my first time really trying to do tours. We did a tour in Asia, in Japan and South Korea, and then we just did this West Coast thing. We're going to do Europe. So I'm really trying to do it, and it's a learning experience, and it is very stressful, as all of a sudden you're responsible. Um, getting to getting everything together, making sure you have the rental cars, making sure the flights are right, that the venues have this backline, maybe you need a bass from this place, all these things that I kind of took for granted because I've been a sideband so much for the last many years. Um, and I have done a little bit of leading enough where I think I'm a better sideman because of it, because I know the stress and that's involved. But I think I have an even more a bigger appreciation now for it after doing it quite a bit myself. Just a lot of empathy for band leaders who I'm working with because it does take just a tremendous amount of work to put something together like this. Even if you have I had a, promoter and road manager in Japan, and even still, it was a lot to do. So. Um, and then as a sideman, these days it's really just about learning music, preparing music, like Caroline and Max, the examples I gave. They write some of the hardest music I've ever heard, seen. So it's a process to get that music together and then to perform it correctly. Is yeah. I did this gig a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I guess, with John Patitucci, and it was this new project, or actually, it's something a suite of music he wrote a few years ago for string orchestra and jazz trio, and I had, I think, 3 days to get the music together, maybe because I was in Japan and on tour, and I got back and it was a live recording and a gig at the Chelsea Music Festival, and let me tell you, that's about as stressed as I've ever been, even though John makes everything as easy as it could possibly be. And he's just a beautiful person. Um, trying to figure out what I'm going to play along with the orchestra and knowing that it's a live recording and not having the time to prepare that I wanted to. And um, yeah, that's
That sounds
a
pretty
next
stressful.
level. Yeah, that's like next level stress, for me anyway. Um, so yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
different stress.
How is that when you're gonna, it's gonna be recorded? It's like, okay, I'm this. Well, this is gonna be recorded forever.
Yeah, no isolation there, and it's like string orchestra. You know what I mean? So if it gets picked up everywhere. So yeah, with one of Caroline's recordings, she had a string quartet that I was in the room with, and that music was incredibly hard and intricate, with a lot of parts that I was playing along with maybe the cello or the viola or whatever. And that was pretty stressful to be in a recording session, um, needing to do that and knowing that any mistake you make is kind of it's going to be caught. You know what I mean? No isolation. So this was a similar thing, but obviously when it's live on top of that, it's a little extra
Right,
adrenaline.
yeah. At least in the studio, you might be able to do another take, right? But then as I was talking to Eric Alexander not long ago, he's like, "But you don't know what take they're going to pick. Might not be your best. Might not be your best take."
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been fortunate to always have a lot of creative control. I haven't had too much of that. Well, if you're a sideman, that's different. Obviously, you don't know what
Yeah,
take they're gonna. Yeah, that must be what he was talking about.
yeah,
Not that the
right.
label
As a
was picking
sideman,
takes, but as a sideman, oh God,
yeah, you don't
yeah,
know.
that that's bad. And there's so many times where, I- you know, I'll have heard different takes, either in the studio or online or something, and just being like, oh man, why didn't they take that one?
The other one,
But that's the job.
yeah. Yeah, that's funny. It's I love hearing the different perspectives from different musicians. Like some people are like, well, the sideman's not as stressful. Eric was saying that how he always found it be more stressful because of that. It's like, I might not have played my best take on that recording, and but of course, whoever's leading that is going to pick probably their best take or whatever. So
Totally. Always.
yeah,
Yeah, of course. Um, well, I don't know. I think a lot of band leaders are able to get a little bit of a macro view and be like, where does the band overall
overall.
sound best? Not just my best solo or something like that. Um, but sometimes you're playing and you're like, man, I know this is the take. Like you're feeling it. And then, maybe you eat it a little bit on your solo and you're like, I know they're going to pick this one because it is the best one, you know? But yeah, it happens.
What are some of the challenges as far as touring and setting up? Because I know it's not like it used to be where you could kind of set up places to play in city by city to city to city kind of thing, where you could kind of put together an extended tour. How difficult is that to put together a string of places to play, to kind of keep like a tour, so to speak, going?
I mean, it's incredibly difficult. It's almost impossible these days. I mean, just from a financial standpoint, it's basically impossible, but logistically too, it's really hard. There are so many great musicians. Travel is easier than ever in a way. So there's so much competition for venues, and every venue has a different booking timeline. So, even just trying to book a tour in Europe, you can have venues who are like, yeah, we're booking a year and a half out right now.
Wow.
And another venue says, yeah, we're booking 4 to 6 months. Get in touch then. And so, like, you end up with these kind of booked tours that maybe never even get filled in because then the ones who book closer ended up actually booking earlier or whatever it is. Then you end up with these days off or things, and then you end up having to, um, you know, cover hotels and all this stuff. And before you know it, financially, it becomes really difficult to make this work, which is why I think you're seeing just less and less touring from everyone except the most major acts, because it's yeah, it's just unless you have grant support, label support, um, it's really hard. Or a booking agent, a booking agent makes a big difference, and that's yeah, yeah,
What about
that's
the
kind of
jazz
the
festivals and things like
Mhm.
that? I know that's kind of more seasonal, right? But how do you find those are pretty fun to do, pretty to do those when you get the opportunity?
Totally. I mean, there's definitely something for playing in front of a lot of people at once that's really fun. There's drawbacks to that too. The sound is always a little weird. It's not as intimate. You don't always feel the crowd giving back to you. Like I would way rather play in a small club that has really attentive listeners who are just in it with you and giving you energy, and you're going back and forth, like versus playing for, you know several thousand who maybe are into it, but you can't feel it, or aren't into it. I don't know. But obviously, yeah, festivals are great because you have the support of a big organization. They take so many people to put together. Yeah.
When you're playing at these different clubs, I'm always curious. Being a pianist, you're going to show up and you got a piano there, right? So You read all these stories about, Bill Evans playing around bad keys. I guess maybe back then it was a little bit different how they read hit some horrific places pianos to play on. Tell us a little bit about those experiences. What you usually end up having at these different places to play?
Yeah, man. It's a constant struggle. I would say probably things were better back then. I have a feeling because
Really?
oh yeah, pianos have gotten really bad these days. They're tough to find. Many venues don't even have them anymore. Um, and they're not well maintained. Typically, there's only a few places that really take care of their instruments. Um, in the US anyway. It's better in Europe, way better in Japan. Um, but yeah, it's pretty tough. It's every piano's different. Usually they're pretty beat up. So
Really?
it's yeah.
So unless you're obviously some of these big famous clubs, they're going to keep theirs probably maintained, right?
Yep.
But so you don't know unless you've been there before. I guess they have a house piano in there, right? But they don't
Yeah.
keep them tuned up and everything, and keep them all in nice shape. And you're
No, unfortunately not. I mean, even some clubs that have wonderful pianos don't do a good job of tuning, to be
really, you would think
honest.
that.
Yeah, I know you would. Especially because in the grand scheme of running a club like that, it's actually pretty low cost and it makes the music sound so much better. So, especially places that feature pianists or trios, to not have their pianos at least in tune, even if they're tough to play or they have a messed up key or whatever, um, just getting it tuned every couple of weeks seems like a no-brainer to me. But I understand
Interesting.
also, maintaining a club, man, it's got to be really hard, especially, a jazz club. It's got to be razor thin margins in most cases. So I feel for those folks who are trying to keep anything in this business going, you know.
So how do you deal if you show up and one of the keys doesn't ring, or it's not the pads or whatever? Would you just skip around it, or don't play
Yeah,
that
pretty
key?
much, man.
Just kind of
Yep, try to remember, and just do your best, try to figure out what you can do. A lot of prep, I guess I do when I get down to do a sound check and get to know the instrument. I mean, these days I've played at a lot of these clubs repeatedly, so I kind of know the quirks already, but not always. And sometimes there's new pianos, or they've gotten much worse since the last time I played them, or whatever. I start thinking immediately about what I can do and what I can't, and to not try to force an issue. If the piano is really tough and it's not allowing me the facility that I want, don't try to just push through it and maybe not really get there. Like don't try to make the piano be something it's not, but to play in a way that will allow everything to work. So maybe it means playing more simply, more melodically, or trying to build energy and interest in other ways using either dynamics or phrasing or whatever it is. Just trying to play to the strength of the instrument rather than getting hung up on its weaknesses.
Yeah, what do you play at home? Do you usually play a regular piano? Do you play keyboards, or how do you feel about playing, the keyboards and things like that, weighty keyboards?
Yeah, I mean, I have a piano at home. I have a Yamaha mid-sized grand that I love very much. And I don't really enjoy playing keyboards that much. There's certain things you can do with them that are super fun, especially when it's in more of like a lead role. Like I love when you get to just sustain a note. You know what I mean? Piano, the note dies so fast, but if you're playing a lead, it's a lot of fun. Um, but the expressiveness, the level of expression that you can get with the properly regulated hammers is so, so, so much richer than anything, no matter how good the keyboard is. And the just the physical feeling of the resonance of the instrument, feeling the actual resonance of it in your body and in your ears, is it just a totally different experience for me. than through an amp or through headphones. So yeah, I guess I'm kind of old school in that way. I really do prefer playing the piano, but I mean, playing a Rhodes or a vintage synth or anything that can be totally fun in the right context too.
So do you ever
Yeah.
have do you ever get where you have to take a keyboard out to a place to play, or do you always just go places that has a real piano?
It's pretty rare these days that I have to bring a keyboard, and frankly, I don't even really have a good one. I have a Nord that I had in college. I love Nord pianos; they're great. And this one has been all over the world, in different settings. It's definitely a warrior, but it's such a rare thing these days that I have to bring an instrument, or even play a keyboard, really. But um, yeah, it's become less of a focus for me these
Hmm.
days.
What kind of music are you listening to these days? Like what do you put on when you go home, or do you not listen to a lot of music? I know some musicians don't listen to a lot of things, but what are your listening
Man,
habits?
it's a great question. I mean, I do go back and forth. I can definitely relate to musicians not wanting to listen to music. And my wife is a brilliant pianist and musician.
Oh, really?
So there's enough music in both of our lives where a lot of times we just want to watch a movie or listen to a podcast or something like that. Go for a walk, whatever it is. So, but generally these days, I find myself listening to a lot of kind of classic jazz recordings. I just keep turning back to my favorites, a lot of John Coltrane, a lot of Errol Garner, a lot of Art Tatum. Um, and then I'm always trying to check out living musicians to just see what's being made these days, the music that's being made today, even if it doesn't always resonate with me. I want to know what people are doing. So I do try to do that, go onto Bandcamp and you know, just find stuff. I'm a big fan of the music writer and kind of he's just a writer at this point, Ted Gioia. I really love his
Mm, yeah.
Substack. He's awesome, man, and he really puts in the work, and he is finding new music constantly. So I'm always eager to check out things that he recommends because he does a lot of the legwork and he has great taste. Um, and it's often music from around the world that I've never heard or yeah, things like that. I guess, yeah, and I listen to a lot of classical music, a lot of world music, a lot of music from Brazil. Um, I've been kind of miscast into playing with a lot of Brazilian musicians, and so I love that music very much, but I also feel this kind of need to keep doing my research and to try to get better at the feel and groove and everything of it. So there's like a little bit element of that too, the study side of things, not just listening. But
The
yeah.
what about the as far as your playing, your technique, the whole musical side of things? How do you go about your musical approach? Because there's a lot of people that can be very technically very good, play very fast, and but that's not the same thing as being musically engaging. Which this I think is very musically engaging. You can listen to it over again and always get more out of it. But what are your thoughts on
Thank you.
that? On how you develop that versus because I think it's for a lot of people for myself included, I play guitar and I play a little piano,
Yeah.
but I'm not very good. But it's like you try to focus on playing songs, maybe developing your technique, being able to play faster, things like that. But what about the musical approach to things? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, you always want everything to be a choice. You don't want to be limited by your technique per se. You want to be able to execute everything you could want to or hear, and then make the decision not to, I guess. That seems to be the goal for everyone. But um, my biggest, influence, teacher, everything, was Hal Crook, and he really formed me. And his approach is deeply rooted in motivic development. And kind of always taking a macro view. And his kind of mantra was always it sounds simple, but it's just always make sure what you're doing is making the music great, not good, but great, so that you're always kind of zooming out and just listening to everything around you and just thinking like, is what I'm doing really helping the cause? Is it making everything better? And if it's not, think about why and what you could possibly be doing different. Either in the moment or when you go back and listen to it, you can just, it's easier then. You can be like, was that the right choice? So there's a lot of analysis, I think, for me. I record pretty much every time I play, which is not healthy. But a lot of it just ends up, you know, uh, being a hair shirt or whatever. But it does. I learn a lot about thinking about choices in the moment, and I think that's what it comes down to.
Well, with jazz, unlike a lot of other music, like if you go to rock music, you kind of play the tune, and yeah, you might have a little bit of you put your own stamp on it or whatever. But in jazz, there's a lot more improvisation and conversation between the musicians that can change depending on the night you're playing, how you feel, and so how does that affect? In other words, like your mood, right, can affect the way you're playing that night or how you're communicating with each other.
Totally. Yeah. Obviously, your mood. I mean, it's a high wire act when you're improvising. There's going to be good nights. There's going to be bad nights. You have a bad day. You're tired. You've got great energy. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but I think that's a pretty big reason why a lot of jazz musicians, especially, have substance abuse problems, or just or depression, or whatever it is. Musicians in general, artists who have to perform. Um, because it's like yeah, it's a high wire act, man. It's stressful, and everything you do affects your music. And I think a lot of times people look for a way to relax when they're playing, or to access a different part of their brain, or whatever it is, to try to get past that feeling that you're describing, which is like, how can I do this to the best, you know in a way that's going to make me happy, because that's really what it comes down to in a lot of ways for musicians. We, of course, audience giving us something back is a blessing, but there's many times where my favorite song of the night was the one where the audience had the least reaction to it. And yeah, I don't really know how to reconcile that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But you know um but I think that's where well, I can understand wanting to have a glass of wine or a beer or something to just be like, okay, how can I do play this in a way where I'm going to be happy with myself and feel like I did a great job, like beyond just trying your best. And that's a really hard place to be, and that's probably the same in every field, really, now that I think about it. That's like some general life stuff, is just
Yeah,
like
yeah. Well, one thing
accepting
I
that.
like about jazz, though, and I'm not a jazz player because but I think there's more freedom there to do things that you couldn't. Like, we do a lot of acoustic stuff, classic rock, blues stuff, and you're kind of, you could do some creative things, but it's not. You're still kind of limited. Where jazz, it seems like you've just got more options. You can keep things more, I think, fresh, right? So you can play the same tune every night and have, I think, a little bit more fun with it than you can with other music. That's just my thoughts.
No, of course. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I started playing like classical and blues and rock and stuff like that. That's where I played. That's where I started, and I wanted to move away from that purposefully because of that freedom that you're talking about. It was very enticing and exciting, and I felt I could express myself better when I was improvising, and I still do. I struggle with playing written material. I love improvising. I'm obsessed with it. I think at this point, you kind of have to be if you want to keep
Right.
fighting through this business. Um, it's you're going to make a lot more mistakes, and like I said, there's a lot of risk involved when you're improvising. So it's a really different experience. Um, but I do love the expression and freedom it gives you.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. You have more freedom, but you have to be a better musician. So, yeah, you really, in my opinion, the best jazz musicians to me are the better musicians than in pretty much any other genre, including classical music. In my opinion, even though there's a lot of brilliant musicians, but they're kind of stuck to the repertoire in classical music. Not that that's easy, but I still think it's more difficult to be an improviser, be a great jazz musician. I think is probably the most difficult musically, in my opinion. But
Yeah, I don't know. I guess like once you get to the like upper echelon of any music, when you get to the true masters, it's like it's
yeah,
silly to compare, and I feel you. But yeah, I definitely think like maybe in general, jazz is one of the hardest musics to really get into. It's such a long, long process trying to learn how to just function, um, and conceptually, you know what I mean? Because of all the choices you have. In classical, what's being asked of you as a instrumentalist, as a reader, from memory, everything is so extreme and at such a higher level than what's really asked in most jazz settings. That those are two different worlds, and that stuff is so crazy. I could never. It's just it takes such an incredible genius brain to be in that world. Um, but I think conceptually it's easier to wrap your head around pretty quick. It's like, here's the music, play the music, and then find your own way as best you can to be expressive within that more narrow set of parameters, where the open fields of jazz and what's being asked of you in every given moment, where it's like choice, 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 choice. And from each instant choice and it needs to be, it's like trying to hit a baseball. It's like you have less than what is it? It's like a third of a second or something like that.
yeah,
uh, it's that similar thing where it's like everything is happening so fast, and you have to have the judgment in that time to say, like, was that good? Was that bad? Should I follow this thread? Should I let it go? Should I try something new? Should I change things up? Am I interacting? Am I listening? Am I in the pocket? Am I rushing? There's all this stuff and there is some of that for sure in classical music, rock, all that, of course, anyone who's playing at a high level has so much to think about, let alone singing and delivering a lyric and telling a story and connecting and I mean that's like a whole other thing, But I do think that there is something that really takes a long time to learn with jazz, and I see it with students compared to other forms. You can kind of get going quite a bit quicker, I think, in other fields.
right. Before we go, what are your
Sure.
thoughts on the future of jazz? I mean, this what would you I would consider this kind of like a post bop. And also talk. Let's talk a little bit about this cover before we go too. I want to because
Yeah.
this is a really cool and kind of reflects what the kind of abstract composition type thing that's going on here. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, my mom, Tayo Heuser, it's a tough name, Tayouheuser. Please check out her work. She's a brilliant, I mean, she's very acclaimed and she has pieces in museums all over the world and stuff. But yeah, she's a great abstract artist, though she didn't necessarily start in that way. She started in more figurative. She went to RISD and even to like help pay for college and stuff, she was painting portraits of baseball players at the Pawtucket Red Sox when they would graduate to go play for Boston. They would always have a portrait done, and that was my mom's job. It was to do that for
Oh,
years and
cool.
stuff. And so she definitely, and she's done sculpture and all this other stuff. But as she's gone into abstract throughout her life, that's been something that's been around me a lot growing up, and I've just always been around abstract art. So that question that it asks you, what do you think this means? How does this make you feel? Without giving everything away has been something I've sat with for forever. And my mom was always so good about not telling me what she was thinking about and just being like, well, even as, little Julian, just being like, yeah, what do you think it's about? How does it make you feel? What do you think it is? And it's always interesting how you can have a completely different interpretation, and that's totally fine. It doesn't need to be anything else, you know? And I love that so much. And that's another reason why I love playing jazz is it's so abstract, you know, and instrumental music, but yeah, especially jazz, it can be hard to follow. And I love trying to anyway, trying to guess.
Yeah, I'm glad you put this on vinyl record too. Was that, did you plan that out that you wanted to put it out on record? Do you collect records at all, vinyl records?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a collector because I know what a real collector looks like, but I have several vinyl, you know, and I love listening to it. I have a solid setup at home that I love, and it's my favorite way to listen to music. Um, I've never done vinyl before, so when the label said we want to do vinyl, I was excited. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was my choice, but I was super happy to hear that that was going to happen. So. Um, Yeah, it's my first final, so I hope it sounds up to snuff.
Yeah, and I was curious about because when you're back in the day when you put on an album, you've got about 22 minutes of music, 20 minutes of music on each side, right? So you got about 40 minutes of music. And so when you're putting out an album, are you thinking about did you think about that with this particular project, how much you were going to put on the record or the CD? And also, I think in my opinion, even though in our modern era with CD, people like to pack as much music as they can onto a CD, right? Because you feel like you're getting ripped off. If you buy a CD and there's 35 minutes worth of music on it, you're like, oh man. But at the same time, it's almost like if you do 70 minutes, that's like two albums worth of music back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, right? So does that come into play when you put this record together about how much you were going to record, what you were going to use for the record?
I mean, I'm such a big fan of short records, short concerts. I love playing a short set and then a little break and then another short set. I think these really long records um, can exhaust me, and so I did consider that. But I'm terrible at following my own advice. After all that, I still put out long records, despite my best efforts. I do try to do shorter tracks than most in with jazz, but even still, some of them end up kind of long. And yeah, I didn't think about the difference between what was going to be on the CD or streaming and the album. I didn't want to have any limitations and wanted the songs to just be what they're going to be. And then I figured I'd put it together, and it was hard to make the cuts that I did for the LP, but maybe it's a better record, with the brevity. Maybe it's a little more succinct.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I was thinking about that because I would personally I would rather have it on vinyl, and I think 40 minutes is enough time where you can sit down, you listen 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever, flip it over, listen to the other 20 minutes, and all the best material that artist recorded is there on that record, right? Or what they consider to be the best. But not only that, if you did record twice as much, you would have enough to do another record, that would be in the can that you could have that you could use for a second record, which is what they kind of did back in the day when a lot of these bands recorded 2 albums, 3 albums a year. A lot of those were recorded maybe over 2 sessions and they did 3 records or something.
totally. I mean, look at the Beatles. They were so great about picking only their best stuff. And when you go and you hear the tunes that didn't make these different records, you can kind of always be like, yeah, I mean, that's right. They're great. There's so many great songs that never made it to record. Still, somehow they had more floating around, but they were uncanny in picking all the best stuff, and that's a great way to do it. That way, you get like only the good stuff, and I could again probably follow that advice better
Yes.
myself.
So did you put out everything you recorded for this particular session? Was everything that you recorded put out? I'm not talking about every take, but every song? No.
No, no,
Oh,
there's a few
interesting.
songs that didn't get on there. Some of them ended up being released as singles and stuff like that. The label still wanted to put them out, so they just put them out as singles. Um, and yeah, just some of them just didn't come together. in the way that I wanted, and that's okay too. We had a lot of time in the studio. We had a day and a half, which was a luxury. So um, we did probably more than I normally would have. So I guess I did pare things down, and I think the record isn't the CD isn't crazy long. Uh, there's not that much difference between the two. I think it's only two songs, something like that. Um, but yeah, yeah, I'm with you. I prefer the LP experience. You
And
know,
so going forward, your future projects, you're going to plan on putting those out on record as well, vinyl record.
I'd really like to, yeah, if at all possible. I did this crazy project recently, which is one of my favorite things I've ever done. I'm gonna get it out eventually, but it had these really long. It's basically we ended up playing for you know just open for almost 6 hours, something like that. And I'm gonna have to go through and like cut it
Wow.
together. And there are these long passages that develop really slowly that I love, and you kind of need to experience it from start to finish. It's asking a lot of the listener, but they're some of them maybe more than 20 minutes, and then I don't really know what to do with something like that. There's really only one way to handle it, but
You
it
need,
might end up being
yeah, you need two LPs or three LPs.
maybe you need maybe that's the answer, which is a hard thing to do these days. But it might just be like each side is just one thing. But I'd rather have it be that. You know what I mean? I'd rather have it be you know, succinct and just rather than too much information at once. So I'm definitely going to be thinking vinyl minded, I
How to
think,
do that?
moving
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
What are your opinion on the future of jazz and this whole AI thing? Is that going to affect?
Oh
Do you
God.
think that's going to affect jazz musicians as much as it's going to affect other things?
All right. Yeah. I mean, how could it not? It's going to affect everyone, obviously. There's so many things at play. I think, music education, humanities education, arts education, all this stuff kind of plays a role when people start to lose the ability to determine what's real and what's not. What I don't want to say what's good and what's not, but like there's just exposure to different art that is not happening so much. It becomes easier to just be like to see everything in the category of like uh expendable, cheap, so I don't have a lot of faith that most people would be able to tell the difference between some pretty mediocre to really bad AI jazz and some really great jazz by masters. We're not there yet, but another 5 years we're going to be there. And who knows? Maybe some really amazing stuff will come out of it. But I'm not super optimistic, I guess, about the future of art as it fights with AI because it seems to be, like everything these days, really profit driven and a race to the bottom. So if you can save money by having a slightly less masterful product, that seems to be the way everything has been moving for decades now. So I hope that's not the case. I hope there'll be a renaissance or a push back towards human made, maybe a stamp like organic or whatever, human made art or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But it's a scary time for me anyway.
Yeah, I think a way around it is I really would like to see more live recordings that come out on record. And that way, that's kind of like the stamp. And with jazz, that's kind of, I think, easier to get away with than it is in rock music because there's so many people I know that they hate live versions. Like if they want to hear the Eagles, even if they go to an Eagles concert, the solo has to be exactly like it is on the record or they're upset. But when it comes to jazz, I think you have more leeway, and I think that may be a way of getting around that. In other words, you put out regular live records, and like you were saying, it's easier to get recordings now when you're playing live. So anyway, that's just something I was thinking that for jazz, that might be a way to focus on live recordings.
Yeah, I mean, there was this hope that as the streaming models started to really um, just dominate the field, that there would be a pushback towards live music. But in fact, it was the opposite. And we saw a massive fall off, especially in classical jazz world, folk, blues, everything that wasn't pretty strictly in a very narrow window of pop music, um, completely fall off.
Isn't that
Which,
crazy?
yeah. So I hope that maybe that will start to change. People will start to crave the experience of live music, but I'm just not sure. I mean, we were kind of talking about this earlier, but Miles's model for his great records in like the 60s and stuff was he basically had his band, that band with Herbie and Wayne and Ron and Tony. They played the same standards almost every night, like 200 gigs a year. And he would literally tell them, if you play the same thing 2 nights in a row, you're effing fired, man. You know what I mean? Like you need to be creative every night and give me something new every night. And that's really unique. And then because they had to become so inventive and so creative and had to keep pushing and trying and finding new things every night, they would go into the studio and Miles would bring out an entire book of new tunes that they'd never played before. And he'd be like, all right, take that approach, everything that we've been doing, and put it towards this new stuff that you've never even played. Um, we don't have the luxury of doing that these days. We don't have 200 gig bands, forget about it. But maybe there's something about that general idea of everything being new, a new experience every time you hear it when it's played live. Maybe that's something um, that is harder to replicate. And yeah, maybe that'll help us out in this coming battle.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really appreciate you hanging out with me, and I
My
definitely,
pleasure.
you, definitely, everybody's got to go out and pick this up. It's wonderful, and you can get it
Thank
on
you.
CD and on a record. So you get a couple bonus tracks on the CD. Mine was autographed, so I really appreciate you hanging out. And any upcoming things you want to let anybody know about? Where you're playing, the things, your future projects coming up, that kind of thing. What are your focuses and focusing on?
Um, Man, well, first off, thanks for having me, and thanks for the invite, and thanks for reviewing the record and listening to it and everything. That's really kind, and I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm playing with my trio. We'll be doing a tour in Europe in October. We've got some stuff in the city here and there, but yeah, I'll be on the road with Caroline. I guess that hopefully that Patitucci live record will come out at some point. Um, yeah, I guess just follow me on Instagram,
I'll
as
put a
bad
link
as
to all
that
that
is.
stuff.
Sure,
Yeah,
yeah, I
but
guess
hey,
that's kind of the best way to keep. I'm trying to be better. I took like almost 2 years off of not updating my website, which is awful. I've just started getting back into it, and I'm putting more updates and stuff on there and keeping my dates in order. So um, it's time to do that again.
yeah.
But I'll do that soon. But yeah, that's probably maybe Instagram is the best way to follow what I've been up to.
And then, so yeah, you definitely shoot me an email when some of that recording comes out, and
Sure.
some of the other stuff that you're on. And then if you are going to be doing a live recording or anything like that, definitely got to let me know. And
Will do. Yeah,
definitely,
thanks.
yeah, have you back on. So I appreciate you
Great.
hanging out, and hopefully we'll talk again. Thank you so
Hope so,
much.
man. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, we'll see you.
See ya.